Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sreshtha, Purposefully Passionate about Domestic Abuse Awareness. The intent of this series is to bring awareness to mental and emotional abuse. Everyone knows what physical abuse is, what financial abuse is, but with respect to mental and emotional abuse, we aren't easily able to tell the signs of that abuse. Being in our Caribbean culture, something that we see every day, we sometimes can't separate between what is actually abuse and what is really an unhealthy relationship. So this series is intended to bring clarity to what is abuse so that if you find yourself in this situation, you are able to easily recognize it and to make either a change in that relationship, or if you need to exit in the safest way possible. Today, I'm really excited to have Denise Jittan Johnson with us. Mrs. Denise Jittan Johnson is a clinical psychologist in practice since 2011. In addition to her current work as a private practitioner, she is also a consultant psychologist and clinical supervisor with the Rape Crisis Society of Trinidad and Tobago. She has been an active member of the Franciscan Institute Trauma Team since 2014, offering support both locally and regionally, providing psychological first aid in the aftermath of natural disasters. Denise Jittan Johnson utilizes a trauma-informed approach to therapy, treating adults, adolescents, and children. She was instrumental in providing training for the sexual offences court in the jurisdiction of Guyana, areas of gender-based violence and service delivery. Most recently, as part of the Spotlight Initiative through the UNICEF, in partnership with the Judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago, she co-facilitated trainings to judicial officers, court staff, and justice partners, with the aim of providing support in their handling of domestic violence matters. Mrs. Jittan Johnson obtained her Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from the College of St. Benedict, Minnesota, USA, and her Master of Science degree in clinical psychology from the University of the West Indies. She has an additional training from the Trauma Institute and Child Trauma Institute in EDMR, PC, and EFT. Mrs. Jittan Johnson is a member of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists and a past member of the executive, having held the position of Assistant Secretary in 2017. So I think, guys, you can tell how lucky I am that Denise has agreed to support and to contribute to this series. Denise, welcome to this series, and I will ask you to share a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always so weird to hear things about yourself read out loud, but I appreciate so much for the invitation to be here. So as you can tell from my bio, one of my main passions is being able to help persons in coping with trauma. And I really have this fundamental belief therapeutically that your life experience shapes how you see the world, how you interact with other people, and how you see yourself. And definitely when we have unfortunate and traumatic situations happen to us, like domestic violence, it really erodes your sense of self and your sense of relationships. So I'm really excited to be able to talk about all of this today.
Yes, I'm excited even how you open, because I myself, having gone through therapy 1 year ago, I discovered so many things about myself, and what you are saying in respect of life experiences shaping how we behave. I actually found that out only 1 year ago. Like I say, I thought I was good. I mean, I have my problems. I'm human, I'll have problems. But I thought I was fine, plodding along in life. And then I realized, all these things that really shaped the way I behave, and even the people I choose and relationships that I had no idea about. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much. And with that, I will ask you to explain or really define, break down what is abuse for our viewers, specifically mental and emotional abuse on a psychological level.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when we're talking about abuse, what we're really focusing on is this pattern of coercive and assaultive behavior that's really aimed at minimizing the victim's sense of who they are. You see that sense of self and that sense of agency. So it really is what the nutshell of abuse is. And when we're speaking about agency, we're really talking about that belief that you can control the direction that you have in your life, who you spend time with, and basically how you live your life. And you see that marker of agency is possibly one of the biggest things to consider when we're distinguishing between a person who is a victim and a person who is a survivor of abuse. And, people don't really think about that distinction too much, this separating out of victim versus survivor. And I think that that's a really important step to do when we're talking about any form of abuse, because when we're thinking about who a victim is, they don't believe that they can get away or that there's any alternative to the abuse that they're experiencing. Whereas, if we're thinking about a survivor, they've really transitioned into that space of believing that their situation can change. So when we're thinking about abuse, I think that core, that idea of agency is really important. And then even going further, thinking that domestic abuse, intimate partner violence, it can't exist without that relationship. Both, legally, as defined by the legislation and all of that, but even more so when we're thinking about this interpersonal behavior, this interaction with two people. Yeah, because the relationship is so much more than just the couple. It's that intimacy that these partners have. And it's that intimacy is what makes that cohesion possible. You see this weaving together of intimacy and abuse that's used to perpetuate the behavior. And it's used to keep the person stuck in this victim mentality. And those hallmark things about being reminded of the good times and bringing home flowers, and that whole dance of intimacy versus abuse, that is what keeps this abusive pattern going. The perpetrator relies on that relationship to continue this cycle of abuse.
Yeah. No, I find it's interesting how you put it, because to be honest with you, I have read a lot just in preparation for the series. I haven't studied this, but I have read a lot, and I haven't seen it put across like that, where you relate the intimacy to the abuse, because from what I have seen, and this is just what I have seen, and even in my own experience, you always look at the good times and you hold on to that good time. The one time he maybe bought you flowers or told you he really loved you, and you kind of blank out the 98 other times when you've been dejected and alienated and all of those things. But I never actually related it to intimacy, having an intimate relationship, and I don't know if this is what you're saying, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and the abuser using that intimacy to get you to kind of hold on to the relationship, so that you don't, I don't know, focus is the correct word, focus on the abuse and want to break free.
Yeah, because if that relationship didn't exist, if that intimacy didn't exist, then it would be real easy for you to just pick up yourself and walk away, because you don't have that tie to this person. Yeah. So it's that dance between that remembering the good times and that's the abusive pattern right there. That's that abusive cycle. Is like without those things to hold on to, then the cycle can't continue, because then it will be really easy to just walk away.
Yeah. And is that why, let me just ask you this question, is that why I just want to say men like to have a child? Is that because why I'm asking that question is because one of the survivors that I had, when she told her story, she said she felt that when she had her daughter, she felt that she was locked into the relationship. With this is someone who went on to have a 21-year marriage with abuse. And then I know of other friends that I have had where the partner they want to have a child, and then, well, they break up or whatever. And even like in my own relationship, when I was breaking off that relationship, the things that were told to me was like, if you want, we can have another baby. So is that part of that attempt to sort of lock you in so you don't want to leave, or that's something completely different?
Well, each situation is really unique. But you see this, we have our societal beliefs about what families should be and what partnerships should be, and beliefs about what it means to stay together as a family. So technically there is this societal belief that if you have a child with somebody, it's harder to leave. And to some extent, that is true, because having a child with somebody means that you are forever connected to them through this person. And then we have our own beliefs about what is healthy for kids. We have these beliefs that happy, healthy children only come from a 2-parent household. So that overarching belief really does keep people in situations that are unhealthy for a lot longer, because we have this narrative that if you don't grow up in a 2-parent household, you're somehow disadvantaged. But the flip side of that narrative isn't spoken about, is that if it is an unhealthy partnership, if the parents aren't relating to each other in a healthy way, that is more detrimental to an extent than growing up in a single parent household. So I think it is fueled by, the individual perpetrators, maybe their own beliefs about having a child, but then the reasons that the relationships last so much longer is because of those societal beliefs. And if you get me started on society and our post-colonial mindset and how that perpetuates our beliefs about abuse, you could get me talking for hours, because like you very rightfully said,
I have that same belief.
Yeah, is that that we live in a culture and a society, and we could go into the historical context and everything, but we live in a society where abuse is almost normalized. If you listen to even the music, if you listen to conversation, if you listen to just, look at the way that people interact with each other, abuse and violence and anger is almost a default way of dealing with conflict. And I won't talk too much about it, but it literally is tied to our post-colonial history of indentureship, forced servitude, slavery. All of those things tie into how we as a culture, not uniquely Trinidad, but Caribbean and any post-colonial society, shapes their beliefs and their values around women and around how we interact with one another. Yeah.
I actually share that same exact belief, and I'm very passionate about it. I haven't studied it as you have to be able to speak at length about it, but just in doing my own research, and I guess I'm becoming my own person, and wanting certain things for myself and my daughter. I have a young daughter. That is very glaring in my mind. Okay, so let's get back to, so we spoke about what is abuse. What are the types of abuse that exist in society?
Yeah. So when we think about abuse, like you were saying, is like usually people get locked into the idea of physical abuse or sexual abuse, or, that type of overt, in your face abuse, financial abuse and things like that. But when we're thinking about the dynamics of an abusive relationship, the abuse happens long before that first, physical or overt abuse actually happens. Yeah. So it's we also have to think about those nuances of emotional abuse, psychological abuse, battering, and all of these things. And usually when I say battering, people just think, battering as in physical, but battering and physical abuse are two different things. Battering is kind of the precursor to physical abuse. And it's this, what it is this continuous reinforcement of a power imbalance. Yeah. So abuse thrives on this sense of imbalanced power, of the abuser being the one in control, the dominant person, and the victim, the survivor, being submissive. And battering is this reinforcement through how it is you're interacting, what it is you're saying to the person, what it is this person is forced to believe about themselves in their relationship and in their marriage. So really it's this, for example, it could be undervaluing of the role that you play in the family. It could be undervaluing of your contributions to the household, be it financial or support-wise. And it really, when we're thinking about it, every instant is just reinforcing that the abuser is all-powerful, all-knowing, in control, and the victim is just almost subservient and there. Yeah.
So that battering is through verbal, through talk and actions and interactions.
And then coming into, because that ties really, it's almost intertwined with this idea of psychological abuse. But whereas battering is that reinforcement of the power dynamic, this psychological and emotional abuse is this wearing down of the person's self-confidence. Yeah. So one phase is that the differentiation of the power dynamic. The next phase is eroding the self-confidence and self-worth of this person. Yeah. So it goes hand in hand. It could happen at the same time, in different spaces and different quantities, but those are really these precursors to what physical abuse looks like. Because thinking about it as well, if you go straight into the physical abuse, it's really easy to walk away because you don't have that emotional tie. But if it is that you really erode this person's sense of self, erode this person's sense of autonomy, then the physical abuse almost becomes acceptable. I've spoken to some women who would have said quite plainly is that they would have preferred, it's like, okay, well, just hit me because at least I can deal with the physical pain. But that emotional pain is even worse because we know how to tend to physical wounds, but when it comes to emotional wounds, then we're a little bit shaky with that, and being able to understand how to manage. Yeah.
Yes, because we are not brought up to deal and manage our emotions at all, or to recognize when something is wrong. Even how we were brought up before. Well, now I'm trying to learn different ways to bring up my daughter, but that sort of abuse was almost programmed into you to accept it if it were to happen to you into your adult life.
Yeah, and thinking of, sorry, I talked over you, but thinking about even how we speak to our children is, you tell them, well, why are you crying for that? You don't cry for that. Come, you have to, if you don't hear it as feel kind of deal. And it's all of those things that culturally kind of build up this tolerance for that physical abuse. Yeah, and don't even get me started on this idea of spiritual abuse and using religion as a coercive form in abusive relationships. Because when we're now talking about spiritual abuse, it's kind of using a person's faith belief as a manipulation tactic, as a way of controlling.
Yeah, I actually had a survivor talk about that. In that episode, we spoke about how pieces of scripture was taken out in order to make her believe that she's supposed to be XYZ, but this is a bright person. So she read the scripture, and the piece that speaks to her power, her feminine divine, was never spoken to. And it really was, I didn't even know that was a categorization of abuse, spiritual abuse, because it really was that the the people around her, it's not that anything is wrong with that religion, but the people around her used pieces of it to mentally abuse her to the point where she didn't even realize until her husband left, and 2 years after, then somebody told her, well, you were so badly abused, you didn't even realize it. She never even knew. She was just trying to please. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because it actually connects and ties with the episodes that I've been doing, and I haven't highlighted that because I didn't know about it.
Yeah. So and that's spiritual, and then that's cultural thing too. It all ties together in terms of what we're told in what you accept. Yeah. And then other side of spiritual abuse too is limiting or taking away your right and your freedom to practice your own religious and spiritual beliefs too. So it could go on the flip side as well. But yeah, is that in a very real way, that's a point of view that we don't think about too much in terms of abuse. We experience it, but having words to be able to recognize and describe that, hey, this isn't quite right. We don't have that vocabulary yet.
And before we move on, can you distinguish between the mental and the emotional abuse? Because I get that question, and I know one is what you think in your mind, and emotional is what you feel, but I can't explain it properly. So you can just explain that.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about that mental abuse, it's really shifting that way that you think about yourself. Is this that you start to form these negative beliefs about yourself. So you really start to think, well, I'm stupid, or I'm weak, or, I really can't do anything without this person. And it's about, that narrative that you're having inside of your mind. So what it is, what your self-talk is. And when we talk about that emotional abuse, it's talking about how you feel in response to that interaction. So when we're talking about the mental, it's really the thoughts and the beliefs and those distortions that happen in terms of your own self-talk, thinking about your own self-worth, your autonomy, your self-confidence, those kind of things. And when we're talking emotional abuse, you're feeling sad, you're feeling anguish, you're feeling pain, you're feeling, all of those other feelings that come along with the abusive pattern. Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm much clearer on that, because I knew what it was just from reading, but like even for me, in trying to distinguish, is this mental or was this emotional, I kind of get confused as to which is which, because it's so closely intertwined, like the same thing, like something that is demeaning could cause both, right?
Exactly.
Both the mental and the emotional. So that is where I was having an issue trying to distinguish, but I understand.
And it's really, it really does go together, because the way that we think internally, that drives how we feel. So if it is that you can change your mental narrative, then you can change how you feel as well. So if it is that you're able to recognize this person calling you stupid, calling you whatever, but you're able to have that moment where you're able to say, no, I'm not stupid. Then you're shifting, so that again, you're shifting from victim to survivor. You're shifting in that you're not feeling demeaned anymore. You're feeling confident and self-assured that no, you're wrong. This isn't the truth. And you're able to connect the dots in thinking, well, if I was stupid, I wouldn't be successful in my job. If I was stupid, I wouldn't be advancing and doing things and getting recognized for my work. If it's not job-wise, but just interaction with people. Is that if I was really this awful person that you're trying to paint me as, how come I have a good relationship with my family or my friends and things like that too? So that's, again, that shift between survivor and victim has exactly that frame between mental and emotional. Yeah. So
okay. And so what are some of the signs that you are getting interrelationship? Because, we grew up with this fairy tale kind of belief, a woman I'm talking about, and you look for the prince, right? And you just look for maybe outward qualities at first, and then you meet the person and you're interacting with this person, but you're not really aware what I really need to be looking for in this interaction. That is a flag. I think at the last, when I had the Know Your Options, you were talking about pink flags. So what it is you really need to be looking out for in your relationships that may be a sign that this relationship could turn into an abusive relationship.
So I always say the first sign that something might be wrong is if you feel that you can't be yourself around the person. If you feel like if you have to hide certain things, or you feel like if you kind of tiptoe around and shield certain parts of yourself from them. Yeah, as if you don't feel that level of comfort. Yeah. So I always say, trust your gut. If your gut's telling you something, if you have this instinct that you're like, I don't really like that, but I always say, trust that gut, because your gut don't lie to you. Yeah. So if it is that you have these moments of discomfort, that's usually a sign. Another sign that I would say to look for in terms of persons who have the potential to be abusive is looking at how they handle conflict with other people. Yeah. So if it is that they have a pattern of just cutting people off, if they have no long-term friendships to really talk about, thinking about how other people speak about these people, how other people experience them, that's generally something to look out for. And on the flip side too is persons who have this abusive possibility can be quite charismatic, is that they can sweep you off your feet. They, have these very big gestures. People around them might think that they can do no wrong and kind of put them on this pedestal. That's also something to look out for a little bit. I mean, not saying that there are no people who are genuinely amazing and awesome and pedestal worthy, but persons generally have flaws. Yeah. And if it is that this person doesn't seem to be able to readily admit that they have flaws, or readily see that there are things that they themselves need to work on, if it is that you don't get apologies for things that you might raise that you're uncomfortable with or dissatisfied with, or if you never get a genuine, sincere apology. And when I say a sincere apology, apologies are only sincere in my eyes if it's followed by changed behavior and changed pattern. If you have an apology, big gesture, flowers, dinner, whatever, but it's not followed by changed behavior, then that's something also to look out for. Yeah. So really tuning into those feelings, asking yourself, the question is, can I really be genuinely me around them? Do I feel respected? Do I feel like if we can have disagreements that are addressed in a respectful manner, and looking out for those signs? Because I 100% believe that a relationship is only truly a lasting relationship if you have a disagreement, if you have a squabble, and both parties come out feeling mutually respected, feeling like if they were heard, and feeling like if the issue was resolved without feeling degraded, without feeling diminished, without feeling like if there was something wrong. If you can get through a disagreement and have those positive feelings and those positive outcomes as a result, then you're probably in a happy, healthy relationship. Yeah.
I want to ask you about two things. So you talk about the grandiose gestures, right? And now there is an awakening in respect of narcissism, which is, again, just what I've read. I haven't studied it. But I have so many friends who have been in relationships with, if you just look at the narrative, you would say, okay, this person has, he was a narcissist. We may be defining it wrong because, of course, we are not psychologists, so we're not assessing the person. But there is so much of that sort of behavior prevalent now. And I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about that, getting into a relationship with somebody who may have those traits. And if I'm saying it incorrectly, feel free to correct me. And even getting out of the relationship, because what I have seen as well in those types of relationships, the power or the need for power is something that the parties end up fighting for. And when I say power, I don't want to say little, but things like who has control and care of the children, even if one party was really paying attention, but suddenly at the time for divorce or separation, if the parties weren't married, there is that wanting to hold on to that power that may be written in a document, not necessarily in the actual life experience, but it may just be written in the document. So maybe just to say you have joint custody, but you're really not doing anything. So I don't know if you just talk a little bit about those types of relationships, and if someone would find themselves in that sort of relationship, how maybe they can manage through that.
Yeah. One of the hallmark signs of narcissism is this inability to recognize flaws in yourself. Because narcissism is really this pattern, this pervasive pattern of behavior. So when we're talking narcissism, it's not just about your relationship with this one person or the narcissist relationship with you. It's about how they interact and how their relationships with everybody else is as well. So when we're thinking about a person who is narcissistic, is that they can only recognize the good and complementary things about themselves. And they cannot take any sort of criticism, any sort of accepting blame or ownership in the reason things didn't turn out positively. So narcissism isn't just about these dynamics of being in power or winning, or, like you're describing in these child custody battles, but narcissism is really about this inability to reflect on your own actions and behaviors and how it hurt or offended or, minimized another person. So if the person just can't connect to your challenge, they can't connect to your hurt or your pain in a way that is respectful, they can't accept blame and ownership for what they did to hurt you, it's always your fault, then you're probably dealing with a narcissist. But again, leave it up to the psychologist to diagnose.
But when you say can't connect, I just want to understand what you mean. What drives that inability to connect? So I'll just give you an example. Like in a relationship I would be crying, and the person would walk in the room, troops, and walk back out the room. And then I was looking at this video on YouTube of someone who says he is a narcissist, and he was explaining why certain things are done. And he said that he was explaining that same situation with, I guess, a partner. And he said what happened is that he never understood how he was supposed to behave when that happened. So like whatever in childhood or whatever, that it's like the brain skipped that part of development. So I just wanted you to comment on that, because I don't know if it's thrown out as a YouTube video, but I just wanted, because, part of healing through compassion is also understanding the other side of the story. So I say these episodes are about healing through compassion. It's not about blaming or shaming anyone. So that is just why I'm asking that question. So we kind of understand too, what kind of goes on in that person's mind.
Yeah. And when it comes to, I talked to narcissism and then about perpetrator behavior as two separate things. But when we talk about narcissism, it's this inability to see value in emotions. Yeah. So it's this dismissive attitude toward any sort of emotional response. Yeah. So it's really that inability to see value in tending to emotional needs, especially negative emotional needs. Yeah. And when it comes to a person who is a perpetrator, because you're right, is that understanding perpetrator behavior is all part of healing this domestic abuse cycle. And there's so many factors that feed into perpetrators' behavior. For example, their own childhood experience and experience with domestic violence. Oftentimes, when dealing with perpetrators, they often have their own family history and pattern of abusive behaviors as well. Sometimes these patterns of abusive behaviors are so pervasive in their life that they actually believe that this is how we behave. This is normal. This is why I'm making this a big fuss. This, my mother went through this, my auntie went through this, my grandmother went through this. They could do it, why you can't do it? And it's this this accepted pattern of behavior that's just normed to them, as opposed to with narcissists, this inability to connect with emotions. So when thinking about perpetrator behavior, we tend to think about, again, if we're thinking post-colonial society, attitudes and beliefs about who we are as people. Thinking about Black and brown persons weren't seen as human. And if you're not seen as human, especially our Black and brown men, if they're not seen as human, humans don't have emotions. I mean, not humans, property doesn't have emotion. And if it is that you're not seen as human, then you're not allowed to connect with your emotion. Showing emotion is dangerous. If it is, we're thinking about forced labor, is that if you had too many emotions, you weren't going to survive. Yeah. And if it is now thinking that we are raised by generations who were taught not to feel your feelings, that the only acceptable feelings are anger and aggression, then it is that we have to, as a culture, reprogram ourselves, like you're talking about, you're shifting up the ways that we're raising our children and the beliefs that we're teaching them now, is allowing us to be able to understand that we are allowed to have emotions. We're allowed to express our emotions. We're allowed to put words to how we are feeling, and it is safe for us to do that. Because if it is, we don't express our feelings, they're going to be pent up. They are going to be explosive, and it has the potential to come out in abusive patterns, be it through physical abuse, emotional abuse, all of those other forms of abuse that we spoke about. So understanding that history, societal expectations of what it means to be a man is that, as a man, the only acceptable feelings that you're allowed to feel is happy, angry, horny. Those are, no, and if you really think about it, our expectations of Caribbean men when it comes to their emotion is really narrow. Is that they're not allowed to feel sad. Sometimes sadness may actually be the driving force behind aggressive behavior. So thinking then about creating a society free from domestic violence and gender-based violence, we have to be able to think now about how we're expecting our men to behave and the standards that we're holding our men to. And starting, I have a son, a 3-year-old son, is that teaching him that to label how you feel. If he's feeling angry, like he tells me, "Mommy, I'm so angry with you right now." And he's allowed to tell me that he's angry. Or he tells me, "Mommy, what you said made me sad." And he's allowed to say that he feels sad. You're allowed to voice those things and tell me why you're feeling sad, and sit down and feel your feelings. So it's all of that.
Yeah, it's so interesting how you put it. Because I knew that how we came down from that post-colonial, I knew that is what informed behaviors. But how you explained how the men being seen as property, not unable to really show emotions to survive in that time, and then coming down from that time into what we are now, where now we are transitioning a little bit more. But even like in my parents' time, it really was about the burden on the man to carry the weight of the family, and to provide finances and to be that pillar in the family. And now it is shifting, but there isn't that conversation on how do we shift the behavior of the man to understand that, well, you don't need to be, you're no longer property. Maybe that's a better way to put it. You are a person, you are a human, and it's okay to feel. It's okay to have emotions. It is okay to break down, and it's okay to engage in conversation. So it's very interesting to me, what you spoke about, and really just leads to how much more we need to talk as a society about these things for the sake of our children, so that they don't end up in the circumstances that we have met.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you, based on what you were talking about, the abuse, is trauma bonded relationships. So I did have someone comment under one of my posts that in trauma bonded relationships, the person holds on to that person even though the person may be abusing them. And I told them I didn't really completely understand that, because I didn't really read about it, but I would ask the therapist to talk about it. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when we're thinking about trauma bonded relationships, it's really this idea of being, of being codependent with one another. It's this space of this fundamental belief that without this other person, my life cannot go on. And then thinking about that trauma bond in relation to that trauma cycle, this cycle of abuse, is that if we're thinking about that bond that they have, it's almost that thinking about it in terms of, we have this initial explosive event, right? Those explosive events don't happen very often. But after the explosive event, you go into this honeymoon period. Yeah. This period where things are good, things are happy, things are healthy, we're functioning as a typical relationship would, where we're having our typical daily routine, our cycle, and things are good. And that honeymoon period, it lasts for different spaces and different phases. Yeah. So for some people, a honeymoon period could be a couple of months. For some persons, a honeymoon period could last a year. But there is this sweet spot in the relationship. And then there's this tension building phase of the cycle. So there's this phase where, you feel like if you're walking on eggshells. You start to notice, this person, is the abuser, is being a little bit more moody, and you start getting that apprehension. And it's this slow build, this slow tension that comes and culminates again in that explosion. And again, the cycle can continue. It could continue indefinitely. But what generally happens in these cycles is that as it continues, it gets a little bit worse. the explosive situations get a little bit more harsh. That feeling, the honeymoon period lasts a little bit less time. And then that tension building phase starts to take up the majority of that cycle. If we're thinking about it as a cycle, that tension building phase becomes that default way of being. So thinking about that trauma bond is that persons who are abused, they don't notice that cycle because they're in it. And it's just their norm, their experience, their life. And it goes on indefinitely until there is this acute explosion that is enough to shock this person into seeking help. Yeah. When we say seeking help, it's that they may tell a trusted friend, they may call police, they may go to a support center or something like that. But again, it's equally important to understand that just because there's this help-seeking behavior, it doesn't necessarily mean that the person is ready to leave. Yeah. So persons would likely seek help at or around the time of that explosion. But then, things get back nice. And then they go back into their way of being. And then they may believe that, okay, well, last time I asked for help, but I didn't leave, so I'm not allowed to ask for help anymore. And then they stay even longer. They try to create their life and live in that space and create some sort of comfort in that cycle until it happens again. And most often than not, these help-seeking behaviors come after those explosions, and they're most effective during those explosive, post-explosive phases. So understanding if it is that you're a friend, family member, person who's working with survivors of domestic abuse, intimate partner violence, knowing that it's not that this person is being difficult or doesn't want to leave or all of those things. It's just that it's terrifying for them. And there's a certain, it's terrifying for them to leave. And there's a certain comfort in staying. Yeah. There's a certain comfort because at least that's certainty.
It's terrifying for them. Just help me understand that when you say it's terrifying for them, they're not scared of the person. That's not what you mean.
Leaving is the terrifying part.
Okay.
The idea of thinking about life without that person is terrifying. And sometimes that fear is even more than that fear of the person. Yeah. It's this belief that the violence is somehow their fault. Is that they rationalize to some extent that, oh, you know what, I really shouldn't have done this to piss them off. So, I take blame for that. It's not their fault. Yeah, it's me. I pushed a button. They start to think that that the violence is, he's stressed out at work or whatever, and they kind of normalize it in that sense. If I leave, I don't have anywhere else to be. I don't have a house. I don't have a home. I already maxed out all of my help-seeking behaviors. They're not going to take me on again. Yeah. I don't have any access to money or financial support. How are my children going to be taken care of? They have this fear or this belief that the person might find them. And if they find them, the repercussions of leaving means that violence might escalate. And you know what? Let me keep the peace here. I could deal with this level of violence, but if I leave, I know that's going to take it up 100 notches. So when it's that fear of leaving, it's those factors. And I know I didn't touch on all of the factors, but it's that belief and that fear that staying in the relationship might be safer, that keeps them there and keeps that trauma bond going.
Okay. Okay, so thank you so much, Denise. As we are coming to time, and don't worry, Denise is going to be back because I have so many more things I want to ask her. She is such a wealth of information and puts things across so well that even I am now thinking a million more things that I need to ask to figure out how do we really heal through compassion. But I just want to end with a couple of questions that persons would have sent in. So I'm going to read these two together because she will address them cohesively. So this first one, I'm presently going through a situation with my niece and nephews. The parents are abusive. We are trying to get them out of the house and by their grandfather safely. And the other one is I've been a single mom for 4 years and I'm currently living with my dad. However, he abuses my kid and I verbally. He is an addict smoker, and when he doesn't get it, he takes it out on us. Twice he hit me, and many times he told me, kill myself or he will, etc. I, however, don't want to report it because he is my dad. I was out of a job last year, March, due to COVID, and I have been trying every day to get an income to move out from here. It isn't a stable, peaceful, and safe home for my kid, especially. If I didn't have him and I was alone, I would have waited it out. I have no family to turn to. I tried salary leave grant and nothing, and I am starting from scratch. What can I do?
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to these questions, the first thing that we generally think about is how to strengthen yourself mentally when you're dealing with an abusive situation, with this understanding, especially with this situation with this mother and child living with an abusive parent, that leaving immediately mightn't be an option. Yeah. So the first step is, and if this is the only thing that we remember from this talk, is this fundamental understanding that the abuse is not your fault. Yeah. There's no point in time, no situation where it's appropriate for anybody at all, be it parent, be it spouse, be it anybody. There's no situation where it's appropriate for your personal autonomy to be violated. When we say personal autonomy, I'm not only talking about your physical well-being, but also your emotional well-being. Yeah. Understanding that the blame for this abuse is solely on the perpetrator. You are not to blame for any of their problematic behaviors. Yeah. So that's the first thing. The second thing is understanding what the perpetrator's triggers are. So you're learning how to exist, how to coexist now in a space where we're understanding how not to push their buttons. If it means that you're just limiting interaction altogether, if it is that you're keeping peace for now, just knowing that what are some of the things that are the triggers. And if you're in the situation long enough, and if it's a father-daughter relationship, you've grown up with this person, so you know who this person is, you know the things that are buttons, and stay away from that. Yeah. The third is to have a safety plan. And when I say a safety plan, is having a plan of action of what you are going to do in those explosive moments. So if it is that you have a bag already packed with your important documents, with some changes of clothes, with essential items that you would need to be able to leave quickly, have that packed. You have a child, discuss with the child what that safety plan would look like, and know that if this situation is happening at no matter time of day or whatever, you can pick up and you can leave quickly. Yeah. And then the follow-up to that is being able to have a plan and a strategy to leave. So now existing in this space becomes existing on a temporary basis. So exhausting your options, planning and unplanning and relearning how to have an exit plan that's plausible for you. Yeah. And then knowing in extreme situations and in extreme cases that there are women's shelters available. Yeah. If it is that you call the emergency hotlines, 800 SAVE, to be able to access support, being able to call the police. And I know you're somewhat reluctant to get authorities involved, but knowing that if it comes to a matter of your safety, that is the best option that you have if we're in the middle of an explosive situation. Even if it is that, let's say, a situation happens in the middle of the night, the safest place for you to make your way to, if you don't have any social or family support, is that police station. Yeah. And then the same framework applies to children who are living in an abusive environment, is that you want to fortify them to have a safety plan, to be able to understand that this is not their fault, because especially with younger children, is they really internalize and believe that this other person is acting in this way because of me. You know, I shouldn't have asked for that snack, or I shouldn't have run through the house and broken something. And they believe that because they did that, then they deserve whatever abuse that is put onto them. But then, especially when we're thinking about young children who you know to be in an abusive situation, the fundamental thing is that this needs to be reported to Child Protection Services. And I say that because legally, if you know of an abusive situation and it is not reported, you are liable for that as well. If it is that you have prior knowledge and you know for a fact that abuse is going on and there's no action taken, then you become liable as well. So knowing that reporting to the authorities or doing your very best to remove them from that situation and to safety becomes your number one priority. It isn't about the feelings of the parents. It isn't about what it's going to do for your family relationship, but understanding that the safety needs of these minor children trumps any sort of perception of family relationship. When it comes to safety needs of young kids, and it is written in the legislation that if you know about abuse and you don't actively do something to stop it, then you are as well liable under the law. So keeping those things in mind as well.
Let me just ask you, because you spoke about contacting child services. Mm-hmm. Would you know what is the procedure or what steps are taken when those persons come? Because I'm not sure if persons may be afraid that maybe they will take the children completely away. And I don't know if that may be a real fear. I'm thinking maybe that might be a fear. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So the steps to making a report of child abuse, first step, call the hotline. I believe it's 800-2014, but we could double check that before anything. But that should be the hotline number for Children's Authority. Generally speaking, it is the ultimate space is being able to keep families together. So if it is that there is a family member or a safe person that the child could be put in the care of, that's the first line space, not taking away and putting in a children's home. So if it is, because family unification is very important, and the authority tends to recognize that. But if it is that you are a fit person or know of a fit person who can care for the child, legal orders can be put into place to appoint a fit person who's usually a family member to care for the child, as it is the investigations or whatnot are being are being done. Now, I can't speak to their process outright, but that's generally the space that is held. In extreme circumstances, yes, children may be taken away and put into a place of safety if there's no fit person who is identifiable. But generally speaking, that is not that's the extreme result that tends to happen.
Right. Okay. So Denise, thank you so much for all that you shared. There was so many new things that we learned as part of this series that I haven't spoken to before, like the battering and the spiritual abuse. And those are things that the fact that we are not aware of it means that it is happening and people are not even recognizing that it is happening. So I'm really grateful that you brought those things up so that persons can be a little bit more aware of how the abuse progresses, what are the different types of abuse, how we identify it. And next week, we will talk a little bit more on how you exit an abusive relationship safely, as well as other things. So thank you so much, Denise, for sharing all that you did. And we will see you guys next week. If you are in a domestically abusive situation, you can call 800-SAVE. If you need to reach a psychologist, I will actually have Denise's information at the end of the series and also in the bottom underneath in the bio. You can get all of her information, which is on her website. So I will see you guys next week. Bye.